There you go.
Senator Clark, we're back live. Welcome back, everybody. I don't have my agenda in front of me. Is Cassie next?
Yes, Cassie's here.
Okay. I think we need to hear about this new loan program, Cassie. Welcome.
Thank you. Cassie Palimas, Vermont Economic Development Authority. There have been a lot of very good points that have been made during the course of this conversation. And so I'm glad that I had the chance to listen in. The Vida loan program, as you titled it, is it's not something that exists right now. So I just want to be clear that there is no Vida loan program right now. This is something that's in the works per discussions that I've had with Joan as far as sort of brainstorming and ideas on how to continue with the economic recovery grants, how to create a better and faster way to get the money out and address where the gaps are from a working capital standpoint. I know that you're running behind already, but I do want to just take a few minutes to put into context the Paycheck Protection Program, because I think that it's something that folks will want to, compare any Vida loan program to the Sba Ppp program. So that the Sba Ppp program was a boon to small businesses. It really helped tremendously, but it came out in various stages. So the first round, which started about in April of 2020, was different than the second round. And what the SBA and businesses banks found that the program needed to keep getting tweaked along the way so that it was addressing the right businesses in the right way. So I think, a lot of what you've been hearing is, you got to get the criteria and the formula right. And you don't always know what that is going in. So I think that's important to know that, for these things, and I don't have a lot of experience. This is the first pandemic I've been through in trying to finance small businesses, but businesses are different. You can make generalizations about the accommodation sector or the restaurant sector, and needs are similar across those particular sectors. But somebody mentioned, Vida does individual loan underwriting. That is what we do because that's the nature of commercial businesses. Not everyone is the same. Everyone has a unique balance sheet and a unique income statement and unique circumstances and unique structure on how they are organized legally, and that impacts how they manage their bottom line. So back to the PPP, the first round, just the criteria was, what is the payroll? And then there was a multiplier effect on the payroll, and there were operating expenses on that too, but it didn't consider a decrease in revenues or net income. It was really, what are those expenses that you need to cover? And we'll cover 2.5 months worth, or some pretty much that. Then in round two, because the pandemic was dragging on, businesses were still not getting enough money. Their revenues were not keeping up with their costs. So it was tweaked to add a component in there, which did take into consideration a slight drop in revenue. So if a business had a 25% decrease in revenues over these periods of time, it could be measured quarterly, any quarter, year over year kind of thing, then you could get a second loan. And then on top of that, if you were in certain sectors, namely accommodations and hospitality, you could get 3.5 times your monthly payroll. So that was PPP. Vida did just under 1,000, somewhere between 900 and 1,000 PPP loans over the course of the entire program, which ended in May of 2021. So the good news is businesses received a lot of money through PPP. But what we also know is there are some businesses that are still not in a place where their revenues are keeping up with their cost structure. Nobody anticipated the pandemic to go on as long as it has. And I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how much, if another variant comes up, we're going to be talking about this for a very long time. So it's the sectors that really have to do with consumer services, and it's the restaurants, it's the possibly gyms still, where people gather and they're either still reluctant to fully gather, or they're just not able to have enough labor. Restaurants have that double whammy of they don't have enough labor, and that's not just restaurants, but we know that for a fact that, they used to be open 7 days a week. They're only open 4 days a week now. It's probably because they don't have enough staff. And then on top of that, there are inventory problems. Now that may be temporary. It could be that the supply chain issues will resolve. I do think they will, but I don't know when. That's another drag on businesses being able to get back to where they were. Not every business, but certainly some businesses. So the challenge is to set it up properly so that any program would address those businesses where the revenues and the cost structure are still not in alignment, and to figure that out for whatever period of time going forward. I'll stop there because honestly, I don't have anything really prepared. I don't have any diagrams. I really am happy to take questions, and Vida does want to be as supportive as possible. The other thing that I just want to keep in mind, Vida does loans. We don't do grants. So this is being structured as a forgivable loan, which is why the comparison to the Paycheck Protection Program. That does create work on the forgiveness side. It's not just a one-time transaction. So we would need to look at it both at origination and then at forgiveness. We know how to do that. We did it with PPP and we were very successful. We can resurrect and recreate that operational structure internally. But I do want to remind folks, I am a small organization and I have my own payroll to manage and my own people. So that is another thing that I need to keep in mind, is that we've got our regular loan business side as well. And so I want to be mindful and careful about how we implement this so that we get the right formula, the right eligibility criteria, and the money is put in the hands of the people that need it, or the businesses that need it.
Senator Clarkson.
Cassie, thanks. I have two questions for you. How long would it take you to set this up? That's first one. Our need is great. How long would it take you to set this up?
Well, I could stand the operational side. I could stand up, in a week. Where I want to really spend time is on the developing the program itself, to make sure that we've got the eligibility criteria and the formulas that meet the needs. So, my 2 cents on, anything that's driven by profit is, in Vermont, everything's a small business, and the small business person manages their bottom line. That makes the calculation a little more difficult if you're going to be looking at things like net income, which, you know, is probably not appropriate. That's why you want to look at their revenues and their cost structure.
Right.
And
And
as you mentioned, it's like you almost have to individually underwrite each one. And I don't want to do that because that will not be successful for a program where we need to get the money out. It needs to be, you know, as like the PPP, a lot of the burden was put on the applicants to attest to statements that they were meeting the requirements and eligibility of the SBA program.
so you've looked at the economic recovery grants and what we were trying to get at and bridging people from survival to, you know, to further, you know, further health. Do you think we can accomplish that with this criteria? I mean, can we get at that population that is still in need? And it's not obviously just the for-profit sector. It's heavily nonprofit because it's all the creative sector. It's the square pegs that don't fit into the round holes. It's the businesses that are still hurting. I mean,
Yeah.
you're right. They are public facing businesses. I mean, how many of us are not going to the movies or to a performing arts event because we don't want to be sitting next to somebody, you know, necessarily for a while? So do you think you could get that?
I could get it up and going, but not by Friday.
Yeah, no, and I guess my other question for businesses out there that are watching this and saying, oh no, another forgivable loan program, what percent of the people you loan money to through the PPP, it was a very high percent whose loans were forgiven, as I recall, right?
Yeah, we're still in the process of forgiveness, but very, very high percentage of the ones that have been processed have been forgiven. And if it's not forgiven, there's a portion that's forgiven and a little bit left over.
Right.
But that's few and far between.
Okay, but you think you might be able to have criteria and operational sort of in the next 3 weeks, let's say 2 or 3 weeks, if we were. And I guess my final question is, do you see the ERG population that we were hoping to help being able to migrate to this Vida forgivable loan program? Is it serving the same population? Do you think we'd be serving that population?
Yeah, I want to say yes. We're not involved in those grants, so I don't see them. I don't know the ones that are applying so much. I've seen the criteria, which, you know, it is based on, I think, net profits and having to have a net loss actually, and then subtracting out, and Joan, you can correct me here, subtracting out any prior subsidy that they received. So I would want to make sure I understand that and make sure that we can create a program that does address folks that maybe can't meet those criteria.
Yeah, that's sort of exciting to hear, in the sense that you could, you know, once you establish that criteria, you could start taking applications a week or so, stand it up. Okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you, in terms of helping these folks, would you want legislative involvement, or would you just want to say, here's $20 million and these are the people we want to help? You invent the program without having any feedback from the legislature.
Well, feedback or having the rules written in statute, I guess. Which one are you asking me?
I think the way we would probably go would be, you know, broad statutory guidelines, not detailed regulations or things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some programs that are getting established in this climate with very little input from the legislature and just saying, here's the money, go help these people, So I'm just wondering how you feel as an agency, whether you'd want to have us be partners in doing that.
Well, I think for the program to work, I would need flexibility along the way. And that was the case with the Sba Ppp program. The guidelines did change along the way to reflect the learning experience of what was working well and what was not working.
Right.
That did create a certain amount of confusion, and it created extra work for the lenders because we had to keep up with that and constantly know the guidelines in and out and that they were changing. But it also did make it more effective in that, by tweaking it along the way, we were getting at the folks that were not included from the beginning. There were some pretty big oversights as far as the types of businesses. If you were a contractor or sole proprietor, at the very get-go, that was a non-starter. And so, oops, okay, we learned that we missed that. And then as the pandemic dragged on, it was, as I referenced earlier, the hospitality and accommodation sector needed more money because they were disproportionately impacted. So that kind of flexibility would be very important.
Okay, that's helpful. So an additional question I have is, if you got to the sweet spot with some general guidelines with some flexibility, what's the difference? I guess it's the same, some question similar to Senator Clarkson. What's the difference between ACCD and Vida in administering this program, and why can you do it better? And
Oh, I'm not claiming that we would be better. ACCD is very good at what they do. I think that what I heard Joan say earlier, and I think, I don't know, but if it's a forgivable loan where the borrower or the applicant knows they will be on the hook and have to repay that money if they do not meet the criteria and use the money the way they're supposed to use it, and provide evidence that they have done that in order to receive forgiveness, that it may lead to more viable, the applications being just the viable ones, as opposed to folks who may not really need the money and therefore might have a harder time proving that they used the money and met the requirements of the program and use the money how they said they were going to use the money.
good. Okay. So before we hear from,
Question, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, Senator Brock, I didn't see you. Go ahead, please.
Just Cassie, one of the things that you had mentioned earlier, that in order to get the program up and running relatively quickly, a lot of this would be based upon self-attestation by the applicant. What sort of internal controls would you envision in a program like this in order to deal with self-attestation that may not be accurate?
That's a really good question. So when I said that, it was in reference to how the Sba Ppp program worked. And that was really necessary in order to get the lenders, all the lenders on board with the very brief underwriting that was necessary in order to push out as much money as was required to in a very short period of time. So it was basically put in the burden of the proof on the applicant, on the borrower, and not the lender. So that was the PPP program. What I am concerned about here is that we would be doing a more in-depth underwriting and not necessarily be able to rely on those borrower attestations. We don't have, the SBA writing the rules for us. We're writing the rules. So that's different.
I'm not sure that I quite understand. For example, if you have an applicant who simply provides you with one or more pieces of false information or data, are you checking the data that they give you? Are you providing any kind of internal controls to know that they are in fact giving you accurate and truthful information?
This is what we do every day in our underwriting. It's part of our due diligence. So we require financial statements, or we require tax returns. We require invoices. So we do that in the course of our normal loan programs. Mm-hmm. That is just part of underwriting. What I was trying to explain is that with the Sba PPP program, that level of due diligence was not possible to do. The SBA recognized that and put the burden on the borrower and saying the borrower is signing these, saying, yes, I do need the money. Yes, I do qualify. Yes, this is, and then they did have to provide payroll information and financial statements. That all had to be provided, but the level of due diligence was less in order for the program to work. And that's how the SBA got the lenders involved, because a lender wants to make a good loan. They don't want to make a bad loan, and they don't want the SBA to come back and say, well, you made that bad loan. You should have done more due diligence.
Well, I guess my question still is, in terms of the due diligence that you do based on these self-attestations, would this be the level of due diligence that you would normally do in your other business, or would it be less than that?
I'm confused by when you say the self-attestations. That was for the PPP program.
Well, what I heard, and perhaps maybe I misunderstood, is that in this particular program, in order to get it up and running quickly, you would rely more on self-attestation from the applicant rather than what you would normally do. Now, did I misunderstand what you had said?
Oh, okay. So no, I did not say that in the context of any new program. What I said is I need time to develop a new program. I haven't developed all the, nuances of it, because I want to make sure that I know where the need is and how to develop it appropriately. So I apologize if it was not stated properly.
You would be doing, in effect, what you do in any borrowing situation in terms of providing yourself with assurance that the information that you are receiving from an applicant is valid.
Yes,
correct?
yes, that's what we do every day. But again, for something like this, where we're looking at a short period of time, this ARPA money has an expiration date. Mm-hmm. So if I'm being asked to loan out $20 million in forgivable loans, and it has to be all allocated by a certain period of time, or else the money needs to go back, then I've got a very short window here to make a whole lot of forgivable loans and then forgive them all as well. So there will be a need for a abbreviated underwriting. I need to understand, how much underwriting and how little underwriting I will need to do in order to make this work. And I can't do that by, Friday. I need more information.
So Cass, Senator Brock, can I ask a question at this point? Are you finished?
I may come back to it, but please go ahead.
Okay. So I'm trying to understand what is in from the governor at this point on this program. Is there language in a budget bill for $20 million other than naming the program? Does it have any guardrails on it at this point? Have you prepared any, have you worked with anybody on language describing this program that the governor has suggested in his budget for 2023?
No, if I could speak, there's no specific language other than that there would be $20 million for a forgivable loan program. The idea would be that then Vida would develop the program, sort of similar to how money, I don't know, in other cases, there'd been programs set up by Vida where they had the time and the ability to set up the parameters.
Okay. I think, in the one example that I remember, I don't know if there was anything more than that when we did the, wasn't it sort of the early broadband loans through Vida for the CUDs? We did something through Vida like 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know if there was any more detail than that, but I know we spent a fair amount of time in the finance committee talking about how that would work. So, okay, I just wanted to know whether it sounds like it's, I don't want to label it as a last minute idea, but even if it's been thought out, it hasn't been really, I mean, there's a lot of discussions that have to happen, whether the language gets expanded upon or not. You're certainly looking to have more discussions with other people about what this program would look like before the appropriation process goes through. Senator Clarkson.
So if we are going, I guess I would say this, because what I'm hearing is that this program is being proposed in lieu of continuing a flawed economic recovery program. The economic recovery program we designed last year was too stringent. It had lots of challenges, criteria businesses couldn't meet. My understanding right now is that this Vida opportunity of these forgivable loans is being proposed as sort of basically phase 2 for recovery, for recovery. And that, so if we're viewing this, is that, first of all, is that correct? Is that, Joan, and is that sort of that's sort of my understanding?
I wouldn't call it phase 2. It gets really misleading because we did 3 phases of grants, and this would be a forgivable loan program to take care of working capital needs, just so that it's describing something distinct from the capital investment program, which is for longer term investment needs.
Right. Okay. But you're viewing this sort of as where we would send people still in need.
Correct.
And we're still recovering. This is where we would send them. So this is designed as sort of the next
iteration
of recovery support. Is that
right?
Fair?
That's fair.
Okay. So if that's the case, I would ask Cassie because it sounds like you can set this up. If this is in fact our next step in recovery support, I would hope we could ask you to begin to set this program up so that we could act on it and appropriate this money, or at least ask for the appropriation quickly, and in the next couple weeks to do to help so that we get this up and going to continue the work of recovery in this state, which is still, from what we understand, substantial.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. As I've said to the committee, it's my desire to pass out an omnibus economic development bill, similar to what we're doing with housing. And I would expect there to be a section on this program for the committee to look at. So if in the next 10 days, working with Joan, Cassie, you could come up with some language, as little or as much as you want in there, for a statute, we will begin the process of marking up these various sections. This is a new program. I expect it will not be like, when we did the VHIP program, because of the way it played out, we've got a 5 million now going up program that just has a title to it. There's no statute behind it other than the name of the program. So and that was unusual circumstances, but we don't want to be in that situation. We want more than a title, at least I do. So for this program.
Well, and I think the businesses still need to and we all need clarity on what it's trying to accomplish.
Right.
So it's trying.
Senator Brock.
Yeah, I agree that this is a program that we do have great need for, and we do have businesses that are hurting. I am still uncomfortable with what I heard today on the issue of internal controls and due diligence. And I would like any language that we have to make some reference to that. I realize that there may be a limited amount of time in which to make lots of decisions, but the notion of our shoveling out $20 million without clarity on this issue is something I am very, very uncomfortable with.
You're here. I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's not so much the attestation and stuff like that. I mean, for me, it's somewhat a separation of powers. And we appropriate money. We should have some say as to what the program looks like, in addition to the controls you're talking about. And that's why we do what we do. And
don't have all the internal controls built in on the front end in terms of the level of due diligence that you do compared to what you might normally do. But before you forgive a loan, somewhere along the line, there needs to be something more done to ensure that you haven't given away the money to someone who has defrauded you.
Gotcha. Well,
Can I just
go ahead,
add that I agree with that 100%, which is why I am reluctant to stand up a program today based on not having all the information that I feel comfortable with to stand that program up.
Good.
I recognize and agree. I don't want the money going to places where it's not going to add value and address the businesses that are still hurting. There are a lot of businesses that are not. And why I want to be careful is to make sure that I understand where the need is and structure something that addresses that. I don't expect the state to play the same role that the SBA did and say, the lenders don't have liability here on that piece of it. And that's why I want to be prudent in how this is set up.
And the administration was asking for this in fiscal year 23. So just to be clear, we're not asking to push this in.
Adjustment. Okay. Thank you very much. I think it's a good segue into the auditor, who I'm sure shares some of the feelings that have been expressed. And we have, I assume he's still with us, but we have 10 minutes. Auditor Hoffer, if you're with us.
He's here.
Thank you, Michael. I first want to thank Senator Brock for his comments. I couldn't agree more. I can't say much about the program that was just being discussed by Cassie and you folks because it hasn't been created yet. I will say that to the extent you're going to create a new program or make significant changes to existing programs, I ask you up front to share that information with us and give us a chance to report back on how we see the internal controls that Senator Brock rightly identifies as being so important. We would be happy to do that. And my chief auditor, having spent so much time on the ERG audit, is well positioned to do that. With regard to the CIP, just in passing, I was curious to hear the commissioner's comments about the kinds of projects that would be that have been proposed by applicants who have already come into the system. And I'm sure that many of them are worthy. In fact, I remember it made me think of when I moved to town into Burlington in the late 80s and saw the result of the city's use of its entitlement CDBG funds for, among many other things, the Flynn Theater. Now, that's a really valuable asset for the city and spins off money in a million different ways. So I get that those kinds of investments can be of great value to small and large communities. On the other hand, the commissioner didn't tell you that $15 million, almost a quarter of all the money accounted for in the applications received for the CIP are for manufacturing. And there's a part of me that wonders, why are taxpayers being asked to make capital investments in existing businesses? That's what businesses do. If you don't make capital investments, you're not going to be, competitive. On the other hand, if we're going to make $15 million in capital investments, maybe we should be equity partners. So in any case, on CIP, also, I heard concerns about the requirement that you folks, in my view, wisely required of the program, which is that you have Cvet, based on a model approved by the Joint Fiscal Committee, review them. Admittedly, this is not a simple task. On the other hand, it's not just net fiscal. The statute's very clear and asks for consideration of fiscal, economic, and societal costs and benefits. And I haven't talked to Tom about this, but I'm sure that he and probably his partner, Nick, who's a model wizard, will do their best to do just that. But I can't say anything about that program short of seeing their analysis of the programs, of the project applications, I should say. So I think, the agency's desire to back away from that is both premature, since you haven't seen Tom's analyses, and of concern to me, because I thought what you did last year for this program, considering the amount of money, the governor last time asked for $90 million. That's, well, better than that's a boatload of money. And to not have this kind of analysis on estimated return on investment would be irresponsible, in my view. So I'm glad you did that. And I hope you'll think really hard before you back away from that, because I think it has value. So, since I don't know too much about the Vida proposal, can't speak to that. Not sure where you're going to go on the CIP, but I hope that you will give us the chance to respond to and offer suggestions or comments about new programs or revised programs going forward. We're happy to do that.
So Doug, it sounds to me like there is some interest in turning the operating capital program over to Vida in some ways, putting it simply. But if we were to stay with ACCD on that, and your knowledge of the criteria we put in place, I don't know, just because we spent so little money of that it makes those things absolutely wrong. I agree that we want to get more money out the door, but that number is sort of an arbitrary number that the governor picked and then we adjusted. I'm more concerned to make sure that we're getting money out to businesses that need it. And we've heard from certain segments of the economy that do need it more than others. Are there things in those criteria that jump out at you that could be changed that might make a difference without jeopardizing the goal of getting the money to those businesses that are most in need?
Well, I would be cautious about reducing or lowering the bar too much. As we found in the audit of the original ERG, there was a huge delta between what the agency estimated was the need, which was hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet when you look back at their P&L, it was 10% of that. So I heard Cassie say that, she would probably look into operating loss as opposed to revenue loss. And that's basically what we found in the audit, that's a better approach. I don't know the nature or extent of the need. I have no data to support a position on that one way or the other. I just don't know. But given what we found in the audit of the earlier program, I would be cautious. I know Vida does a good job. They have a great track record. Their loan loss reserve and experience is excellent over the decades. I'm sure they'll get it right, but they need some guidance from you guys, which she made clear. But like Senator Brock, given what we learned about the ERG, I would be very cautious about giving away 20 million bucks without much guidance. You don't want to write the rules. You don't want to get into the weeds, but I'd be careful about that. And furthermore, there was comment, I think, when she was referring to the PPP and how that experience could help her going forward, to the extent that you get evidence about how the monies granted / loaned are used, that would help us on the audit end. If we don't have that evidence, that data, then we couldn't say a word about it,
But,
nor could they.
Mr. Chair,
Yep, Senator Clarkson.
thanks, Doug. Surely in the application for the forgivable loan, we could track the articulated need, because the need is clearly identified in the application. So if we spent on, I would think that this is something they could track, and I look forward to Joan and Cassie working with us to develop this language, because the need, you're right. We don't know what the universe of need is. That is one of our challenges. We all only know anecdotally from our constituents, from our association constituents, that there is huge need still in lodging, restaurants, the creative sector, the public interface sector. So, and we know from our own behaviors. I mean, how many of us are going to the movies right now? We've taken a break from going to performing arts things at the moment. So I go to almost everything as much as I can. So if I'm an example of the creative sector's challenge, I'm very clear on it. So I think we could track what they're asking them for the money for. I mean, I think that's, Vida could do that pretty easily. And I think we could share with you as soon as we get their proposal of the language of how they would set up this program, and we'd love your input.
That'd be great. Thank you. And as to the need, remember that the earlier program asked them for revenue loss, and that was considered the need. And after our analysis of the data, the need was about 1/10 of that. So it really matters as to how you define need going in. So, but if you guys want to share a proposal with us, we'd love to look at it and get back to you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
And by the way, here's something that you might appreciate, since we've talked about it before. To the extent that the CIP, the analyses of the CIP project applications don't all pass muster for a variety of reasons, here's a suggestion. We found in looking at TIF data that both what has occurred and what is expected means that these municipalities are going to spend $107 million on interest in the course of this project. This is just the TIFs that exist, let alone the ones that are to be created. $107 million in interest. It occurs to me that it might be wise to go back to something you and I discussed, Senator Clarkson, about why don't we just give them the money or loan it to them through Vida at much reduced interest rates? And if you've got tens of millions of dollars out there, nobody's going to argue with the value of improving infrastructure in downtowns. And you eliminate a lot of the problems that we've all discussed about TIF. So I really encourage you to think about that.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, committee. Thanks, members of the public. We're past 12 o'clock.
We are?
Yep.
Yikes.
Let people go. It was a tight schedule this morning. We'll have the labor people back probably on Thursday. So we have a busy week for the rest of the week, so stay tuned. And we'll be back tomorrow morning at 9.